Today I'm going to show you some very famous old trees that are in the vicinity where I live. And the first one is going to be an ancient yew. Most of the ancient yews in Britain are grown in churchyards, and this one is no different. So here we are at the entrance of St. George's Church in Crowhurst, and we will have a look at the tree. This is the canopy of the yew. As you can see, it's quite a spreading tree, very near the church building, and the canopy must be every bit about 80 feet wide, and this is the end of February, and if we have a close look at this tree, you will see that this yew tree is flowering, it's in bloom, and at the end of the year it will have these beautiful red berries. Yew trees were usually planted in churchyards because the leaves and the seeds are poisonous, I believe. I think more the leaves are poisonous, so they planted yew trees in churchyards because the cattle were not allowed in the churchyard, so there was very little risk of the cattle being poisoned. And that is why yew trees were mainly planted in churchyards in Britain. So we'll now walk around and show you the spectacular old yew. Here we are approaching the yew, and if there is ever a tree that will give you inspiration for creating bonsai, this should be one of them. I always bring all my great bonsai friends to see this tree because they always get inspiration, and the first reaction is that, wow, it's unbelievable. And this plaque here, Tree Council of Britain has recognized this as one of the very famous trees of Britain, and it appears in many books. Look at all the deadwood. This tree is reputed to be anything from 2,000 to 4,000 years old. There's a lot of dispute or conjecture as to how old this tree is. I think you can safely assume that it must be at least 1,500 years old. I would guess that it is between 2,000 and 2,500 years old, but there are people who believe that this tree could be 4,000 years old. Of course, the age of trees, especially ones that have a hollow trunk, is very hard to determine because there are no rings to count. If we look closer at this tree, it is completely hollow inside. Look at the detail of this tree. All the gins and sharis, you can see it is completely hollow. And how can you count the rings on this tree? There is no way you can count the rings on this tree. This beautiful gin and the trunks, absolutely incredible. The detail of the dead wood is so spectacular that no amount of carving by man can ever reproduce the beautiful effects that you can get in nature. So just admire it for the beauty, and look at it, the burrs at the bottom, so beautiful. I would say that 80% of the tree is dead, and like some of the Japanese trees, they are trying to support the limbs which are tumbling over. And as you come round the corner, you will get a pleasant surprise. This little door apparently was put there in the 19th century, and people used to go into the hollow there to have little tea parties, so I was told. And if we look at it from this side, the diameter of this tree is probably about 12 to 15 feet, and the circumference is about 40 feet in circumference. I like to look at a tree from this side, but it's beautiful from every side. Look at the beautiful driftwood that there is here. And as you look up the tree, you can see the bole of the tree. We need to go back to get a overall view. we've come to see another very famous yew, and this yew is only 3 or 4 miles from the other yew that we've just viewed, and it's still within the vicinity where I live. And this is in another old Anglican church. This is St. Peter's Church. Again, these churches are all 500 or more years old, and we will see a very famous yew which has a completely different character to the one we saw previously. Now this yew, although it's only about 3 miles from the other yew that we've just seen, at same time of the year, but there is not a single flower on this yew. So it just shows how the habits change or vary from tree to tree. Not a single flower in sight. This tree is also reputed to be at least 2,000 years old, and again the locals claim that it can be as much as 4,000 years old. I think in diameter this yew is probably bigger than the Crowhurst yew. This is called the Tandridge yew because it's in the village of Tandridge, and the trunk diameter must be at least 20 to 24 feet in diameter, but it has a completely different character to the previous one. That previous yew had a single trunk, completely hollow. This is also hollow, but the branches are like organ pipes, and they are probably about 80 feet tall, and they all radiate from the center like organ pipes. And while we are standing here, I will show you another feature of this yew. All these young trees which are near the old tree, the mother tree, you'll see a lot of yews around here, and these would have all been air layerings from the mother tree. Can you see that branch touching the ground? And when these branches touch the ground, a tree grows from there and it sprouts again. So this is how the trees naturally layer themselves. And the character of these other offspring, you can see completely the same character. Tall trees with these tall trunks coming up. So you can see the clone is an exact clone of the mother tree. So the nature of the trees are completely the same. So I dare say if you took a cutting from this tree, it will also produce these tall, slender trunks going upwards. So although there are different yews in the same vicinity, they all have a slightly different character. The tree is beautiful from every side. You can see the size of the trunk. I'm dwarfed by the diameter. And look at it, beautiful. And at some stage it would have been struck by lightning because it's completely hollow in the middle, and the main mother trunk would have died at some stage. But the character is quite different from the other one, but nevertheless very majestic and grand. Now this tree is an old English oak tree, and I believe the tree is about 800 years old, 800 to 1,000 years old. And as you can see, it is completely hollow inside, but it's still in very good health. It's so healthy that the inside has completely calloused over, and the trunk diameter must be at least 12 or 15 feet at the base. And next to the old oak tree is the village jail. If we look around the tree, you'll see a plaque, and this little jail was where the local miscreants were put and locked up. So this is the local jail where poachers and drunks were locked and kept overnight. There's such a small building, I don't think it could keep more than 2 or 3 people in there. But it's bang next to the oak tree, but the oak tree is very, very healthy. And as far as I can see, most of it is paved and tarmacked around the tree, and there's no room for it to be fertilized, and yet this tree is very, very healthy, and there are no broken limbs, and this tree will probably live easily for another 500 years or more.